Hello, everyone, and welcome to the latest episode of the Metabolism and Menopause podcast. My name is Stephanie, and I am your host and CEO of Vitality OET. We are a women's nutrition, health, and fitness company that focuses predominantly on women's hormones, particularly as they start going through perimenopause and onwards. We know that you experience so many changes in this time of your life, whether that be hot flashes, night sweats, irritability, brain fog, and of course, weight gain around the middle that seems to have come out of absolutely nowhere despite you not changing anything. So you go back to your tried and true methods of cutting calories, cutting carbs, doing a bunch of cardio, yet nothing seems to work anymore. You're putting in all this effort and not moving in the right direction, or you might even end up going backwards. But we know now that your body is inherently different than when it was prior to having these hormonal changes. So our mission here at Vitality is to help you understand how your body changes in this time of your life so you can reach those health and fitness goals, live a life full of vitality, feel in control and at home in your body again, and really understand how to take care of this new body of yours. So today what I want to talk about is blood sugar. This seems to be a very common topic of conversation lately. And we've talked about this before back in like episode 2 or 3, a long time ago. And I kind of wanted to add in a few extra things in here and really help you understand a bit more about insulin resistance, how it changes during perimenopause and menopause, and really everything that you need to know to help get your blood sugars on track. And lucky for you, that doesn't involve cutting carbs, which is amazing. And I'm going to explain to you how this really works and help you understand how to eat normally and enjoy food without worrying about blood sugar control. Before we hop into this, though, we are doing a giveaway. All you have to do is rate and review the podcast on Apple or Spotify. You'll get 2 chances to win. We'll pick one winner from each side, so a rating and review, and you'll win $200. Super easy, easiest $200 you'll ever do. So if you could leave a rating and review, that would be absolutely amazing. So we have definitely mentioned before that insulin resistance or blood sugar control during perimenopause and menopause does get worse. And this can be due to the dropping of estrogen, so those levels that we see go down, because estrogen plays so many roles in our body. It doesn't just have to do with reproduction, as I'm sure most of you have figured out now if you've been listening for any amount of time. But one of the jobs that estrogen has is to help regulate insulin action. And if estrogen starts to go down, it can lead to an abrupt reduction in our metabolic rate, a shift to increased progression of our metabolic syndrome, which can then lead to insulin resistance. So basically, our blood sugar control just gets worse when estrogen goes down. And we know that estrogen and progesterone affect our cellular responses to insulin. And when we have estrogen dominance, so we have estrogen higher than progesterone because maybe progesterone's dropping down lower, even though estrogen might not technically be high, that ratio between the two is not where we want it to be. So progesterone's usually too low compared to estrogen. We have a much harder time being able to pull sugar into our cells. So we will see that you're going to have an elevation in blood sugar because more sugar will accumulate in your bloodstream because our body just doesn't have that ability to really pull the sugars out of the bloodstream and into the cells like we want. Then we're going to see that flat line of estrogen and progesterone post-menopause. So you have a complete decrease in that insulin sensitivity or an increase in insulin resistance. So again, we have a much harder time regulating blood sugar post-menopausal as well. So this is for all women going through perimenopause and onwards, okay? So what happens is that progesterone and estrogen work together to help push glucose into, which is our sugars, into your liver and into your muscle cells. So again, we lose the ability to have that pathway to help us. So without them, our body becomes far more reliant on something called the GLUT4 response, which is activated in exercise. So for protein mechanisms of pulling glucose across without insulin, which is really great. So we don't need to use insulin if we're using these GLUT4s. So that sounds very sciencey. So let me give you a more visual example that makes sense. So estrogen helps our cells become more sensitive to insulin. So insulin is a protein that is manufactured in one part of the body, our pancreas, and then it moves throughout our blood, affecting other parts in our body. And its role is to make bigger things out of smaller things. So it's a building type of hormone. Insulin is extremely important to our body when it works properly, and it's known for regulating our blood sugar levels. So when we eat foods that increase our blood glucose, so our sugars go up, we will see the pancreas will release insulin, which opens the doors to escort glucose from the blood into different parts of your body. So basically, insulin is like your Uber Eats driver. Okay, so let me explain this. Our blood sugar goes up, and basically that's our body going, hey, we have food that needs to be delivered. So then insulin, the Uber Eats person, goes and picks up the sugar in the bloodstream and delivers it to the cells of the liver and muscle and other areas for our body to utilize. Uber Eats will knock on the door, you open the door, give them the code, sugar can go into the cell. When we become more insulin resistant, when estrogen goes down and we don't have as much help bringing those sugars into the cells like we need, what happens is your Uber Eats driver is just knocking at the door, they're texting you, you're calling you, and it's almost like, you know, when kids used to play knock knock ginger and they'd knock on the doors all the time and you'd go and answer it and then no one was there, and then you'd answer it and no one was there, so then eventually just start ignoring it. That's basically what your cells are doing. They start ignoring insulin. They become resistant to the knocking of the cell doors from insulin. So we become more insulin resistant. So now your Uber Eats driver is like knocking, 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 nothing's happening. And so sugar starts to accumulate more and more and more. So then you have a bigger signal of, hey, we need more insulin to get these sugars out of our bloodstream and into our cells. So then again, it takes more and more insulin to try and bring those sugars down. So then what we see is liver isn't opening the doors, muscle isn't opening the doors, then it ends up getting transported to fat cells, which we do not want. So this is why regulating blood sugar is so important. And this process starts to happen when our estrogen levels go down because we have a much harder time being insulin sensitive when estrogen goes down. So then I talked about these GLUT4 doors, right? Where we don't need insulin to shuttle sugars into our cells. And this is done primarily through exercise. So you have the big door that the Uber Eats guy is knocking on, but you also have these doggy doors, and you don't need insulin to open that. Sugar can just freely go in if that doggy door flap opens. So how do we get that doggy flap door to open so sugar can go into our muscle cells and our liver cells without actually needing insulin? So activity does this. When you are active, you are going to activate these GLUT4 membranes. It opens that doggy door and allows sugars in. So this is why being active is so important. Resistance training does this. Having more muscle cells is important because then you can have more doggy doors available. This is why walking after meals is so helpful. It opens those doors and allows sugar to go into the cells without needing to utilize insulin, which is amazing. But if you're not active, then this doesn't happen. Okay, so I hope that analogy made sense. So basically when we're talking about blood sugar control, when people are talking about insulin resistance, it's just a reduced response to insulin. Our body gets very good at ignoring that knocking on the cell doors. And that can lead to a lot of different conditions. So there's a lot of negative things that can happen when we become more insulin resistant. And insulin resistance is more difficult to diagnose because there's no like single one test that helps with this. But there are some signs of insulin resistance, and they can include some of these. So a waistline over 35 inches in women, 40 inches in men, a fasting glucose level over 100, fasting triglycerides over 150, an HDL cholesterol level under 40 for men and 50 for women, skin tags if you have patches of dark velvety skin. But those are just some signs, okay? So what causes insulin resistance aside from just estrogen levels? Because otherwise, if this was the like root cause of everything, yes, it's a huge contributing factor, but then every single woman who hits perimenopause would automatically be insulin resistant and potentially develop type 2 diabetes, which isn't the case. So what are some other things that contribute to blood sugars, poor blood sugar control and insulin resistance in perimenopause and menopause, and just people in general? So some factors are high cortisol and stress, which of course you guys knew that I was going to talk about. And these this stress can happen from chronic dieting, not eating enough food, not having enough carbohydrates, not sleeping enough, from being go, 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 not focusing on recovery, doing a ton of exercise, just having a very high stress type A go, go, go lifestyle, or you're dealing with a lot of grief and a lot of trauma and financial stress and family stress. All those things are going to increase your blood sugar levels in the absence of food. So this is why a lot of people, I'm going to talk about this a bit later, but a lot of people will cut their carbs and they'll cut calories and they'll start fasting to try and improve their blood sugars, which is incredibly unnecessary. It's not a good time, and it's going to increase your stress levels because we know that when estrogen and progesterone go down, we lose that hormonal buffer. Before, we wouldn't see a rise in cortisol until we got to like a 9 out of 10 on the stress scale. We could handle 9 out of 10 things before cortisol really went up. Now we can only handle a 5 out of 10 because estrogen isn't there to help buffer it. So now you might have been able to handle your dog pooping on the floor and your boss being rude and having deadlines and not sleeping and doing a ton of exercise and skipping meals and not eating carbs. And now all it takes is your boss being a jerk, your dog pooping on the floor, not getting enough sleep, and now boom, cortisol's higher. And what happens when that cortisol is high, even in the absence of carbs, even in the absence of calories, even when you're fasting, when that cortisol level goes up, it will dump sugar into your bloodstream, and it will also break down muscle for energy and put that into your bloodstream as well. And we know we want to preserve muscle because that's how we have those doggy doors to help us be able to move sugars out of our bloodstream and into our muscle cells. And the more muscle you have, the more insulin sensitive you are. So doing the fasting, the low carb, the crazy amounts of cardio, not eating a lot of food will actually increase your blood sugar response anyways, because cortisol is going to break down muscle and really push sugar into your bloodstream anyways. And so cortisol is dumping it in because you're stressed. Blood sugar goes up and it sends a signal to your body to, hey, we need to get rid of these blood sugars. But you're not like actively exercising or something right now in that state to get rid of those blood sugars. You're sitting at your desk or doing whatever it is. You're just in a stressed state. Even if you aren't aware of it, even if you feel like you're handling it okay, this is still occurring in your body. So then insulin goes up to try and get rid of those blood sugars. And eventually sugar will come down, and then your body's like, oh, we still haven't been fed. We're still stressed out. Cortisol's going to dump more sugar into your bloodstream. And then your body's like, oh, we need to get rid of this blood sugar. And then insulin rises again. And this cycle of high cortisol, increasing blood sugar, insulin coming up to try and get rid of blood sugar. And it continues over and over and over. And the more that your body has insulin in it all of the time, so the higher your insulin is in your bloodstream because your blood sugar is high, that's how we develop insulin resistance. Because otherwise we're constantly knocking on those doors all the time. That's like that knock, knock ginger analogy. And now your body's just like, we've heard this noise. It's just a white noise. Actually helps me sleep. It's great. Not worrying about it anymore, right? So by continually doing this, cortisol will always win. Always, always, always win. So this is why fasting and cutting calories and cutting carbs is not the answer, because cortisol is going to mess with that anyways. Another thing that's contributing to our high blood sugar response or insulin resistance is going to be chronic inflammation. This comes typically from highly processed foods. If we are in a high stress state, cortisol increases your inflammation. If we are not having good gut health, because then we see more bloating, that's going to lead to more inflammation, potentially more leaky gut, leading to autoimmune conditions and food sensitivities and even allergies. And that's going to further increase inflammation. And there are studies that actually show that by improving inflammation, you get improved markers of blood sugar control than just limiting your carbohydrate intake, for example. So inflammation actually plays a huge, huge, huge role in this. This doesn't mean you have to be super extreme with your diet. Usually just by combating stress, you can increase or decrease your inflammation substantially. But if you're someone who is doing all the things, you're eating enough food, eating enough carbohydrates, you're doing the de-stressing techniques, you've adjusted your exercise appropriately, then you could look at maybe potentially having more of an anti-inflammatory diet, decreasing your alcohol intake, because that also increases inflammation and cortisol levels, focusing on more anti-inflammatory diet. So potentially playing around with how much dairy you're having, playing around with like how much sugar you're having. So processed sugars from like, cereals and like chips and candy and chocolate and all those kinds of things. Incorporating more omega-3s, healthy fats, those are all really great. Hormonal imbalances will also increase blood sugar. So we see that when we have high or low estrogen, when we have low progesterone, low testosterone, low thyroid function, blood sugar ends up being a huge issue. So not addressing hormonal issues by making sure that we're de-stressing appropriately and actually getting the help that we need, you're always going to have blood sugar be an issue. But you see, the thing is, blood sugar control and insulin resistance is a symptom of something else going on in your body. It's not the root cause most of the time. Most of the time, it's a side effect from not eating enough food, from having too much stress, from not eating enough carbohydrates, not sleeping enough, not doing the right amount of exercise, having too much processed foods in our diet. Those kinds of things influence our hormonal balance and our gut health as well. Will affect your hormonal imbalance so much more than the blood sugar will. So you will help your blood sugar control by addressing the root cause of the hormonal imbalances and are figuring out what causes the hormonal imbalances. And for most women that we work with, it's just you're not eating enough, you're fasting, you're skipping meals, you're not having carbs, you're not sleeping, you're not exercising appropriately. That is our plan of action, and we always see women's blood sugars improve. It's important to note that with your A1C, it can take 120 plus days to see proper changes from test to test because it takes that long for cell turnover to change, where it shows that your cells are less insulin resistant. So paying attention to like how your blood sugar reacts throughout the day is really great. But if you're testing like your A1C every month, that's not enough time to see actual cell turnover to see the true change as to what you've been doing. So you need to stick with it for at least 3 to 4 months before you're going to see changes in those A1C levels. So that's really important to be aware of as well. Like I mentioned, poor sleep is going to make a huge impact. If we're not sleeping enough, cortisol levels go up. When we're not sleeping enough, that's then going to lead to our blood sugar control being quite poor. You're going to have more energy crashes, more cravings, and those cravings we usually give into because we're so exhausted and we're having chips and we're having chocolate, and then those things just by themselves will raise blood sugar. Because how often do you focus on having a full balanced meal and then the chocolate? No, usually it's like I need this now, and you have the chocolate just on its own. So we're going to talk a little bit about that in a little bit too. And then just inactivity as well. So there's so much as too much of a good thing and not enough, right? So you want to find that sweet spot. Resistance training 2 to 3 days a week is an amazing spot. You don't have to do crazy amounts of cardio. Just get some steps in and walk throughout the day and you're good to go. So other factors that contributed to blood sugar issues are, I'm just going to summarize here, high cortisol levels and stress, inflammation, hormonal imbalances, poor sleep, chronic dieting, and inactivity. But we know that insulin resistance can actually lead to all those things too. So it can lead to type 2 diabetes. It can lead to more inflammation. It can lead to higher cortisol levels, weight gain and weight loss resistance, more cravings, poor energy, cardiovascular disease, PCOS, hormonal imbalances. So you can see that some of the causes are also results of insulin resistance. So we have to figure out what is causing what and breaking this cycle. It's not just cutting carbs. It's not just cutting calories. It's not just fasting. Those things tend to do worse in women that we see in perimenopause and menopause. So it's something to be very, very aware of. And again, we are always going to be pro eating first over taking things out and restricting massively because that's not beneficial to anyone's mental health and not sustainable in the long term. So like I said, first reaction is always going to be cutting carbs because that's got to be the problem, right? Because carbs will increase our blood sugars, but too low of carbs will increase stress, which will then dump sugars into your bloodstream anyways, which will lead to insulin resistance, inflammation, and weight gain. So that's not the answer that we're looking for. And then people are like, oh, well, what about fasting? I've heard fasting is really great. Fasting is appropriate for a very small number of the population. It can be really great for men because of their higher testosterone levels. They are able to deal with the stress of not eating. If you are a woman who's already dealing with poor sleep, poor energy, you're having crashes and cravings, you're naturally skipping meals, you're avoiding carbs, you're eating like 1,500 calories or less, fasting is not for you. It's going to make things worse for you because of that cortisol response, and we don't have the estrogen to buffer that stress anymore. So you're going to see a more exaggerated blood sugar response from that effect. You're also going to feel like garbage. And then also cutting calories, right? That's not the answer, because eating too low calories for too long of a time, typically that's like 8 to 12 weeks, we can have some serious health problems, and we don't want our metabolism to slow down and lower the amount of calories that we can eat before we start gaining weight. And a well-fed body is stronger, it's healthier, it's happier, it functions properly, and that goes hand in hand with a healthy blood sugar control response. So I just talked about all the things that you shouldn't do, right? The causes, what can happen, and the thing that you should be avoiding. So how can we improve your blood sugars? How can we improve your A1C? How can we improve your insulin sensitivity without cutting carbs and without cutting calories and without fasting? Here it is. And if you do all these things, not only will you feel better, not only will your blood sugar control improve, but you'll also find body composition will also move in a favorable position. And again, this is going to take time. So this isn't like a 4 weeks and you're done. This is something you have to work at consistently. This is a lifestyle change. So the first one is going to be eating enough protein. We want to aim for 0.8 grams to about 1.2 grams per pound of body weight, or your goal body weight. Okay, so why is this important? Protein helps stabilize blood sugars. It takes longer to digest. It slows the distribution of glucose in your bloodstream. So what that means is it really slows how quickly food empties your stomach and travels through your digestive system. The faster something travels through your digestive system, the higher the blood sugar spike and drop that you're going to experience. The slower something comes out of your stomach and moves through your digestive system, the lower the blood sugar spike is. So instead of going straight up and down, you'll see a very gradual increase. It'll stabilize and then slowly come down, so you don't experience those crazy crashes and cravings and blood sugar issues that you would typically have otherwise. So protein is huge, 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 huge. This is like the number one thing that I tell people to focus on. Increase slowly though, because if you have a low protein diet and then you start really focusing on increasing your protein intake, you can end up with constipation because it slows the digestion process a little bit. So your body needs to take time to get used to eating a higher protein diet. So take your time slowly increasing, typically about 15 grams a week-ish is always a safe bet, because no one's happy if they're not pooping. End of story, period. The next one is no naked carbs. So you always, always, always want to pair carbs with protein or fat. So again, this helps slow down the emptying of your stomach, which not only helps keep you full longer, but avoids that blood sugar spike and drop, because it's a gradual increase, stabilizes, and then drops slowly. So you never want to have carbs just on its own. Okay, so you're never having just chips on its own. You're never having just chocolate on its own. You're always eating it with something. People are like, well, what am I supposed to eat? Well, make sure that you're eating those treats right after a meal. That is the best time to have a treat, or right before you work out, because then you're going to be utilizing those sugars that are going up quickly in your bloodstream. So if you want to have a little piece of chocolate, or you want to have a little bit of candy, or whatever it is, the best time to have that is right after a balanced meal or before a workout. So when we're eating carbs too, the way that you eat your food is important. So the order that you eat your food in. So what you want your plate to look like is about half your plate should be fruit and veg. About a third-ish should be protein, and then about a quarter is a starchy carb. But a lot of people dip into their carb first, and we know the carb is going to spike and then drop, right? Unless it's got lots of fiber in it. So unless you're having like legumes, for example, very high in fiber, you're not going to get that same spike and drop. So what should you do? What you should do is eat a good chunk of your fruit and veg first, and a good chunk of your protein first, before dipping into your carbs. So for example, pasta. I talked about this the other day. I love pasta. It's so good. It's delicious. I love it. We probably have it once a week, maybe once every 2 weeks, depending what we have going on. So it's quick to cook. It's delicious. It's easy. I love it. But how do you control yourself around pasta? Because people are like, oh, I can't control myself around pasta, and I eat too much of it. Well, first you add it into your diet regularly, so it's less novel. But then what you want to do is have some veggie with it and have some protein. So when I went out and had some pasta the other night with some friends, I ordered a side salad. So I ate like half my side salad first, I ate most of the shrimp off of my pasta first, and then I dipped into my pasta and then kind of mixed and matched as I went along. But by eating most of my veggies and a good chunk of my protein first, I'm not experiencing that blood sugar spike and drop. That matters, and you should always do that at all your meals. There should always be a carbohydrate at all your meals, but pay attention to the order that you're eating your food in. This makes a massive difference, huge difference. It's funny how much it changes your blood sugars. Like anyone who has like a continuous glucose monitor or checks their blood sugars, you'll be able to see that makes a pretty big difference. And you just got to play around with the type of carbs. Like, for example, I had a woman that was having sweet potato and it was spiking her sugars too much. I'm like, just have a white potato. And she was like, what? I can do that? And I was like, yeah, have a white potato. Like, it'll actually probably not spike your sugars as much. Had a white potato, was good, was fine. Because sweet potato does have more sugars in it. So it's all, you just got to see how your body responds and pay attention to the order that you're eating in. All these little things matter. You can have carbs and it'll be very beneficial for you in the long run. The next one, like I mentioned, was increasing your fiber. Women should be aiming for about 25 grams of fiber a day. This will again slow down how quickly your stomach empties, so you're not getting the blood sugar spike and drop. Helps keep you full longer, improves your gut health, and helps lower your cholesterol levels. So that's a win-win-win right there. Fiber, you can find lots of high fiber fruits. You can find lots of high fiber veggies. You can find lots of high fiber grains and breads and pastas. There's lots of options. We just got to look for it and not be stuck in this carbs are bad kind of mentality, because they absolutely are not. The next one, like I mentioned, was strength training. So strength training, full body, 2 to 3 days a week, can provide amazing benefits, not only for improving your body composition, but improving your insulin sensitivity. The more muscle you have, the more area that you have for your body to prioritize shuttling your blood sugars to. In order to build muscle, we need to be training with enough intensity. We also need to make sure that we are eating enough. You will not build muscle if you are not eating enough food. Your body will not build muscle in the absence of carbohydrates. There's lots of studies that show, like both men and women alike, if you are resistance training and there's like equal amounts of like same protocol, same nutritional stuff, the only difference is that one group had more carbohydrates than the other, but calories were the same. The group that has more carbohydrates will actually see a better improvement in muscle composition because carbs are protein sparing. So what that means is when your body is in a low carb state, it breaks down muscle for energy. If you have carbohydrates, this doesn't happen. But you need to be aware that during perimenopause and menopause and estrogen goes down, we already have a hard time building and maintaining muscle mass because estrogen helps build it. So when we lose estrogen, we don't have as much. If we're struggling with low testosterone, we also have a reduced ability to put on muscle mass. If our cortisol levels are high or even too low, so that means our body isn't producing enough and we're not having the energy, you're going to see your body break down muscle for energy. And then if you're doing a ton of cardio and you're not resistance training, that also breaks down muscle for energy. If you're not having carbohydrates or enough calories, that also breaks down muscle for energy. So all the things that you're doing that you think are quote unquote helping you lose fat are actually just helping you lose weight, which means you're losing a little bit of body fat, but you're probably losing a lot of muscle mass, which then you don't look fit and you don't look toned because your body fat percentage actually goes up. And then you have less insulin sensitivity, which leads to more potential weight loss resistance or even weight gain, so fat gain. So you might not see the scale change that much, but you'll actually be gaining fat and losing muscle, which is not what you want. Then we have improving your sleep. We want to aim for 7 to 8 hours a night. Poor sleep can lead to much higher blood sugar levels. I'm sure that you notice after a night of some poor sleep, you are having far more cravings, you're more hungry, you're wanting sugary snacks, your blood sugar is more unstable, you are hungry. It's because you didn't get enough sleep and your blood sugars are all over the place. So aiming for 7 to 8 hours will help reduce those cravings and help you feel more in control during the day. But then a lot of people are like, Steph, what do I do if I can't sleep? Well, have you considered a bedtime snack? And people are like, what? I can eat past 7 p.m. without turning into a pumpkin? Absolutely, you can. So this is something we do with the majority of the women in our program. So what you want to do is you want to have a bedtime snack of part carbs and part protein. So my favorite is popcorn and a turkey pepperoni stick. I love popcorn. It's a great high fiber carb. It's going to digest a little bit more slowly, so we're not having a blood sugar spike and drop. You can do like the protein balls with like the oats and the nut butters. You could even do like yogurt with some protein powder and granola, toast with egg or toast with peanut butter. There are lots of different options for a bedtime snack. You want to avoid fruit before bed because typically it digests a little too quickly. But the reason that we do this is having that carbohydrate brings cortisol down and it increases your melatonin, your sleepy hormone. So it's easier to fall asleep. But also it keeps your blood sugar stable throughout the night. So if we're having a carbohydrate that's higher in fiber, you're pairing with some protein or fat, you have a little bit of a rise in your blood sugar, which allows cortisol to come down, melatonin, your sleepy hormone, to come up, and then you're stable throughout the night. And then when your blood sugars drop and cortisol comes up, that's when you wake up. So a lot of people who are waking up in the middle of the night are actually people who are experiencing a cortisol spike and a blood sugar drop. So having a bedtime snack is one of the best ways to do this. It doesn't have to be anything big. Just eating like 30 minutes before bed can be incredibly beneficial and only has to be like 100, 200 calories, like nothing too big. Play around with what works best for you, and playing with the content of like carbs, like how many carbs versus fat and protein. Like it'll take a little bit of tweaking to see what works best for you. This can also be very beneficial for hot flashes because hot flashes tend to be due to blood sugar control. So if you're having hot flashes at nighttime, it can also be a sign that your blood sugars are erratic at night. So very good to know. This is why you shouldn't be having like ice cream before bed or chocolate before bed or alcohol, because those things are going to negatively impact your blood sugar and cortisol levels, making you wake up at nighttime and more likely to experience hot flashes and night sweats. Number 6, the next thing is don't drink a ton of water before eating. So I fell trapped to this in like my mid-late 20s where I was doing like a 2B mindset. I think it was like a Beachbody diet maybe. I don't know. Anyways, I tried this and there was like all these little rules. And I remember the one rule was water first. You drink a cup of water first before you eat your food because it fills you up and then you eat less. This is a huge mistake because what happens is when you're drinking a bunch of water before your meal, it empties your stomach much quicker, which means that you're going to have a blood sugar spike and drop. You're going to be hungry quicker later, which leads to you snacking on like sugary foods anyways, which then is not so great for your waistline or your blood sugar control. So that was something I learned the hard way. And then also having water right before a meal or fluids right before a meal really messes up with the pH balance in your stomach. So your stomach acid will be off. And if you don't have a certain pH in your stomach, you're actually not going to be able to release pepsin and some other enzymes that really help break down food in the digestive process. So it just doesn't happen. And then you experience bloating or a ton of like your tummy starts making loud noises and gurgling and stuff like that after a meal. Typically it's because you had too many fluids at your meal. Fun fact. So if you're struggling with bloating after meals, really avoid drinking a bunch of water around meals, like 15, 20 minutes before and after meals. Avoid fluids. It can make a really big difference for you. And then number 7 is walk 5 to 10 minutes after each meal. Because remember how we talked about by walking, you don't need to use insulin. It opens those doggy doors so sugar can just passively go into the cells without needing insulin to go up. Doing activity after you are eating, just walking for like 10 minutes can really help with this. It also helps with the digestive process as well because it helps blood flow go throughout the body and just get things moving so you're less likely to feel bloated as well. And then lastly is learning to chill the F out. So this is that whole cortisol response I already talked about, where as long as your stress is high from under eating, not having enough carbohydrates, skipping meals, having coffee on an empty stomach, being go, 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 taxi mom, sitting down to eat, but not actually sitting down to eat. You're like working through your lunch. You like wake up in the morning and you're just like, you don't even get a chance to do anything to yourself. It's just constantly rushing and you're dealing with financial stress and grief and sick parents and sick kids and doing all these things. Your blood sugar is going to be out of control. So the biggest advice that I can give you is start eating carbohydrates at all your meals and make sure you're eating them in the right order. making sure that you are eating enough food. So just message me and I will calculate that for you. You can also just book a consultation call below in the show notes. And there is where you can book a call to get your calories calculated for free. Because it's not just how tall you are and how active you are and how heavy you are. Because as you can imagine, there's a lot of things that impact how much food you should be eating, like your past dieting history, your past exercise history, the amount of stress that you're under, the type of activity that you're doing, any chronic conditions that you've had, because all those things are going to drastically influence where your food intake should be. So we can calculate that for you for free, no questions asked, no strings attached. We're not going to try and sell you anything. We just want to help. So make sure you take advantage of that, because we can't always eliminate stress from our life. That's not realistic. So making sure that you understand how to buffer stress appropriately, since your hormones can't really do that for you anymore. Making sure that you understand how to adjust lifestyle and exercise and nutrition to become that buffer for you will change everything. It's not something that can be rushed. It's not steps that you can skip. It's going to take time, but that's what we're here for. Because unfortunately, the industry has given you a mass disservice by telling you to fast and cut calories and cut carbs like crazy. And in the end, it's brought you to the position that you're in right now. And I hate to see it, and it sucks. But we know that this constant cycling is getting you nowhere. You're not feeling any better, and it's not doing anything for your health. So if you need help with that, just message me or book a consultation call. We're always happy to do that for you. And again, don't forget to leave a rating and a review on this podcast to get a chance to win $200. It'll be the easiest $200. Rating and review, we appreciate it. We don't do ads, so that's the only way things really get shared. Thank you so much. Have a good rest of your day and eat your carbs. Talk to you soon. Bye.